Welcome to Hey Ghost Hey, the podcast about ghosts, ghost hunting, and other paranormal phenomena of the Pacific Northwest. I am your host, Charles Crooks, owner, tour guide, and psychic of Bellingham Ghost Tours. We are here because I like ghosts a lot. Now let's begin. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Hey Ghost Hey. I hope that you are staying warm as our days are getting darker in the Northern Hemisphere and the weather is getting nastier. I know some parts of the country have already seen snowfall. Luckily, nothing here in Washington, but we are definitely getting the stormier days, lots of wind, lots of rain. So I hope you are staying cozy during this time. I have just officially wrapped up my 2025 fall season, and we just wrapped it up with the investigations out at the Manresa Castle in Port Townsend. So thank you to everyone who came out and participated for the 3 separate ghost hunts, and a huge thank you to the Manresa Castle themselves, especially the front desk staff for being so kind and accommodating, and so willing to give information about the activity that's going on in the castle. So I'm really excited to go over the footage. I already took a little peek at one of the night cameras that I had while I was sleeping and saw some interesting things. So I very much hope that this is a foreshadowing of things to come as I begin the very long and painstaking evidence review process, especially on a bigger investigation like this. Not only do I have each time to go through, but for each investigation, there's the audio, there's the video, and even multiple cameras and recorders. So it shall begin soon. Not quite sure when I will finish that, but whatever I do find, it will definitely be featured in probably one of the end season episodes for this season. So if not the very last one to be the season finale. So we will see what turns up, but I'm excited to see what was found. But for today's episode, I wanted to have a few special guests share their stories of growing up in a haunted home out in New York State. So I first met Katie when I was hired at Still Life Massage and Float, and one of the very first things I was told in working there was that I had to talk to Katie about her childhood ghostly experiences, as they were quite extensive. But before we get into that, I would just like to take a quick moment to acknowledge Still Life Massage and Float. If you have never experienced them here in Bellingham, Washington, please get yourself there. This is not a paid advertisement in any way, shape, or form. They're just a simply wonderful business that deserves attention. They're run by a local family that is celebrating their 10th anniversary of being open. They have some sensory deprivation float tanks, an infrared sauna, and a full staff of massage therapists. And also I want to say a huge thank you to owners Tim and Shannon, because they came all the way out and joined me for my hike on the Iron Goat Trail, which I talked about in the last episode. And while we did not have anything happen or catch anything, we all have decided that another adventure out there is definitely needed. So please go check out Still Life and have yourself a lovely and relaxing time. But it is because of Still Life that we have our guest, Katie, who is their manager, and her twin sister, Lauren. And so they were kind enough to sit down around the campfire one evening and share their experiences about growing up in a haunted historic home out in New York. So enough waiting, let's just jump right into their haunted childhood. So here we go.
My name is Katie. I am from New York State. I moved over to Washington about 6 years ago. Moved over here because my sister moved out first a couple years before me, and coming to visit, I just fell in love with all the mountains and the landscape. So once I graduated college, I just moved on out here.
Perfect, Lauren.
And my name's Lauren. Katie is my twin sister. And I moved out here in, I think, 2017. I've never have actually been to Washington State, and I kind of just packed up my car, my cats, and we road tripped, and we landed here, and we're like, wow, this is beautiful. But yeah, I'm also obviously from New York. We grew up in a place called Sugarloaf, and it's just kind of, I want to say 60 miles north of New York City. So technically kind of the country. It's definitely turning a little more suburban nowadays, but yeah, so that's where we grew up and where we'll be talking about basically.
So we moved to the house we moved into the house the day before me and Lauren turned 2 years old. So we were pretty little. We were born originally in New Jersey, and our family moved to this house. This house was known to my dad because it actually was owned by his good friend's parents. So my dad had spent a lot of time going and actually hanging out with his friends and partying in this house. So when
it's a good party house.
It's a great party house, yes. It is an old house that was built in 1749. It has a built-in in-ground pool in the back, which is the main reason that my dad wanted to move there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's also just a big, beautiful house. All of our friends used to come over and just be kind of in amazement of just the structure and all the wood. And when you walked in, it just had an energy to it. And whether you kind of understand paranormal or anything, people would always make comments about just the vibe and the house itself and how old it felt. And it just felt like there was a lot of history there, which there was. So, all right. So my earliest memory, I wish I can remember how old I was. So I must have been kind of 6 to 8 age range. But yeah, it's kind of hard to pin the exact first memory because I feel like growing up in a house where things are happening everywhere, it's almost was normalized. So we didn't really discuss it when we were younger with our parents. Our parents never told us that our house was haunted. So my first memory was when I was sleeping. So Katie and I, we had this room. It was the corner room, and it had 2 doors, so you can walk straight through our room. But ever since we were younger, we were really creeped out by one side of the room because it actually led to the attic. So we actually blocked that off from a young age. So we would change our room how many times, like monthly. We would move our beds around and stuff, but we always made sure to have that door closed off, except on Christmas Eve, so we could get to our gifts quicker in the morning. So that was the only exception of ever having that doorway open. So that being said, a lot of times we did have our bed pushed up against it, and we had bunk beds. So I was sleeping on the bottom bunk, and I think we must have just got bunk beds because it was kind of like we stopped sleeping in the same bed. So it was kind of a big deal. And I remember already kind of being a little scared, as twins, you kind of grow up being side by side. So even something as little as getting your own bed, it's kind of a big deal. So I was already having trouble sleeping. And then all of a sudden I just heard like a ball dropping from the stairs on the other side of the door. And mind you, this was in the middle of winter, and our house is old, so we'd actually have an attic hatch that we'd put down so the heat wouldn't rise. So I knew that the hatch was closed because my dad was really OCD about that. So I knew that wasn't, nobody was going up and down. And then I remember feeling really scared, and then once the ball hit the bottom, all of a sudden I heard footsteps going back up the stairs. So those were two really distinct sounds, the ball dropping and then footsteps of just, it sounded like a person, like an adult. It was definitely a little heavier. And I remember waking Katie up and being really scared. And Katie was just like, go back to sleep, Lauren. And I remember I just put...
Sorry about that.
I just put my sheets over my head and I just like basically, I didn't cry or anything, but I was like, Lauren, you're fine. You're fine. And I remember just falling asleep terrified. And the next day I never told my parents or anything. I just kind of sucked it up and kept living in the house. And that's kind of, I think, the moral of a lot of our stories, right? Mm-hmm. We just kind of went on with it.
We dealt with it ourselves mostly.
Yeah, totally.
So one distinct memory from our childhood was when I was probably a similar age, I'd say, between that 8 and 10 range. Our whole family, it was a nice summer day in New York, so it was hot, and we were all hanging out by the pool in the backyard. So my whole family was out there, nobody else in the house. I had a moment where I had to run up to use the restroom. We always kept water balloons in our basement, just, for fun. I had this great idea that I could ambush everybody at the pool. Very nice of me, I know, but it was going to be a perfect plan. So I was in the basement, which already was pretty creepy, and I was always afraid of.
The creepiest part of our entire house
is the basement, yes. And then, so I was there filling a few water bottles, or a few water balloons, and then I heard someone walking down the steps of the basement. And these are basement steps, so the steps were facing away from me, but you can see through the bottom of the steps. So it's just like one panel, and then they were open, back, sort of. And then I looked over, concerned, and thinking about how everyone of the family is downstairs. And then I just looked over and saw feet, and they were white. It wasn't really, it didn't really feel like it was like white shoes and white pants, but it was just like this weird white. I don't even know how to explain it. But just each step, I just saw 2 white feet and legs just walking down. And I sprinted out of the basement as fast as I could, ran down to the pool, screaming,
crying.
And I was just so flustered. I ran right up to my parents and I was just talking. I just saw a ghost. There's someone in there. And I just remember nobody freaking out at all, actually. It was just, they were just calming me down. I don't even know what they were saying, but nobody went to go check at all. So Nobody else wanted to. But I just remember that distinctly, that it was just, oh, Katie, calm down. Everything's okay. And I was literally in tears and nobody seemed to be responding to the idea of it being a ghost. So that's kind of also ties into what Lauren was saying, how we didn't really tell our parents about things because that was sort of the response we'd get, like, oh, you're being silly kind of thing.
And it's funny though with each other, I remember that moment of Katie running out screaming and crying, and I almost rolled my eyes. Oh, here comes Katie. She's scared. And it's funny because even though in my moment of being scared, I wanted your comfort. And then in return, I did the same thing. I was like, okay, Katie.
I guess we didn't know how to process it.
Yeah. We had no clue how to process it.
And then, I just remember being younger and always being really afraid of the house at night, when it was dark. And we actually all used to, me, Lauren, and our older brother, who's just 3 years older than us, would all take turns actually sleeping with our parents, because we'd rotate around because we would all get scared at different points of the night. And I just remember having to walk through the dark house. No, we'd actually sprint as fast as we could from our room to our parents' room, which was across the whole house.
Yeah.
So I just remember not wanting to look into the long hallway, and just eyes down to the ground and running because I was so afraid to see anything. And I had never seen anything while these moments, but it was always just that eerie feeling of being watched everywhere. Yeah, exactly. It's just the what if I saw someone walking through, what would I do?
And to be fair, Katie, you said we took turns. When I would wake up and I would realize that you were in our parents' bed, I would run for my life. And I would run into our parents' bed and they'd be like, oh gosh, you too, Lauren?
Yep.
And I'm like, I'm not sleeping alone in there. I would be so scared I would be more scared waking up without Katie in the room than anything. And so I would take the treacherous run through the house to get to their bed, which they had a water bed. It was pretty nice.
Yeah, it was very nice, actually.
Yeah.
But
Very
it also,
comforting.
It got to the point where my brother, his bedroom was up in the attic, and he actually got to the point where he was so afraid of sleeping upstairs that he started sleeping in our room with us. And we had like enough beds, especially with the rotation of whoever slept with the parents. But it was like he was so afraid to sleep upstairs in his room because of whatever he felt. He always felt similarly, feeling watched, feeling like you just weren't quite alone.
So I had a really distinct experience. As we've mentioned before, it was kind of obviously an eerie feeling in the house, and I never wanted to stay there by myself. And that being said, our dad kind of, he worked in the city. It was a commute, so he stayed in New Jersey a lot. So we were kind of home alone a good chunk of time, especially when we were older. So I was home from college, and I was in the house. I don't know where Katie was. She wasn't home. And my brother, he was kind of coming in and out all day. And then he decided to go to a party, which I was kind of begging him not to because I was really scared to stay there by myself, which is really embarrassing because I was like 21 years old. The worst part is he actually made me go down into the basement and unlock the back door so he can get in later. And it was like, it was midnight and I ran. 21-year-old me ran through the basement, didn't look in any hallway, any room. I didn't look in the mirrors or the windows. It's ridiculous to think, but I was so scared. And I didn't see anything because I actually was purposely not trying to see anything. I'm lucky I didn't fall or anything because the stairs, like Katie mentioned, are really sketchy and crickety and just old. So yeah, I ran for my life. And that at that point, you're going up like 2 flights of stairs too. So I was sitting in my room and I was just watching TV. For some reason, I had every light off in the house. I was kind of setting myself up for a disaster with this one.
Yeah, honestly.
And I just could not really go to sleep yet. And we've kind of had a history of our doors just opening. So Katie and I actually had this chair that we would pin under our door so it wouldn't open at night because it happened so often. And so I was sitting on the couch, and then all of a sudden, my door swung open, and it was just a really hot, muggy night. We didn't have air conditioning, so there was no airflow at all. So this is obviously a common thing that happened, but I sat there and just sat with it, and I kind of tried to be a little more intentional with it, like, okay, either a ghost came in, or they just left, and I kind of took that moment instead of jumping up and closing the door. I don't know why. I just felt like I needed to just sit there with it. And then once I finally got up, probably 2-3 minutes later, the door slammed right in my face when I was going to grab it. And that has never happened. That intentional, I felt like the door slamming in my face. And then that's when I pinned the door with the chair. And then I just went to sleep. I was scared, but I went to sleep somehow.
Well, there's nothing you can do there.
Yeah, it's I don't know. There's really nothing I can do with this. So
as we got older and we started hanging out with just, a good group of friends. We were in middle school. There was about 12 girls that we hung out with all the time. One of them was having a Halloween party. So, of course, we went. We were all dressed up. And one of them whips out a Ouija board. And had never used it before and was just kind of like, is anyone interested in Ouijaing? And everyone jumped up and was excited about it. So we all started Ouijaing. I think at that point it was just, silly little questions and just figuring it out. It kind of it opened a door for me and Lauren that we were so interested in it and so fascinated by Ouijaing that we ended up bringing it home. And we started Ouijaing at home a lot, and it became a way that we can communicate. Well, we felt like we can communicate with the energy in our house. We had a lot of different experiences with it, and it definitely escalated our encounters at home.
Mm-hmm. And as we just got more and more experience with Ouijaing, our friends would always come to us to Ouija, and it became really apparent that Katie and I we just were really good at channeling the energy to Ouija. A lot of our friends couldn't even get the Ouija board to move at all until Katie and I put our hands over it. So it was kind of almost like validation that the connection we had with the board was very legit and real, and it kind of became the point where our friends would beg us to Ouija with them, and so we became really sought after to be Ouija friends, and
we were popular in that group.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And with that, we kind of Katie and I Ouija'd basically every single day in our house for a while, a really, really long time, and we became friends with this one spirit, and his name was Cod, and he almost became like a guardian to us. We would try to summon other spirits and stuff, and he would do these really specific circles on the Ouija board that we could tell it was him. And so when we were trying to summon other spirits and stuff, he now looking at it, we used to think he was weirdly obsessed with us and wouldn't leave us alone. But I think in hindsight, he was actually protecting us from other bad spirits that might have been in the house. And just kind of didn't really want to expose us to the more negative side of Ouija boarding. So we definitely felt like he was protecting us, but he would pretend to be the other spirit, and then once he'd start doing these circular motions, we'd be like, "Oh God, it's you again." So it was crazy, and we kind of we really leaned into Ouija boarding. We never actually bought our own board. We would just make them out of cardboard. And we never had an official one. It was always, we kind of, going through our room, you could find all these random Ouija boards everywhere.
If we cleaned that room out, we'd find at least 20
we used
probably.
To make some really cool ones though. So our friends were like, "You don't even need to buy them. You just have to make them." So everybody would come over and we'd kind of have arts and crafts and make a Ouija board and then have a Ouija night with people.
So one specific memory from Ouijaing that stood out to me was, at this point we're in high school, so this is already years of us Ouijaing on a pretty regular basis. The friends we were hanging out with at that point, different friend group, they were very interested in Ouijaing. Lauren and I had already started taking a step back from it just because we were nervous. I don't know, it just felt like we were getting very connected to certain spirits in our house, and we just kind of felt like there was a lot of things that felt like it was going missing in our house and everything. We felt like we were being a little bit more messed with. And then, so this specific Christmas, our friends begged us to do it, of course. So we went ahead, we made a Ouija board. It was just about Christmas time, so we had a big Christmas tree in our living room.
9-footer.
We hadn't decorated it yet because we were letting it drop. So it's just in this really big, deep like base. So it's very sturdy. We couldn't move it. Any one of us couldn't move it ourselves.
Well, not to mention, Dad was really OCD about it being perfectly sturdy. So
my dad's an engineer, so he likes
it was in there sturdy.
Exactly. We all took our time to make sure it was in there proper. So of course we're Ouijaing, and as a typical question, can you show us that you're here, is usually what we would go for. And nothing had really ever happened in response to that question, but it was always something that we tried, because why not? Then all of a sudden, right after we asked, can you show us a sign that you're with us? The Christmas tree just ups and falls right over into the middle of the living room. And we are all just staring at each other, jaw dropped, absolutely shocked. Yeah, like it was just the shocking moment of something actually happening. And in that time, like right after we asked it, so it was just like, it really made us feel like there was something there with us. So the four of us, it took all four of us to pick up this tree and turn it upright. So just the thought of it falling on it by itself is just like, seemed physically impossible. Like, because of course we're trying to look at it. We're trying to figure out what could have happened, what could have caused it to fall, not in relating to paranormal stuff. And it just didn't make sense. It just absolutely did not make any sense. So as we flip it up, we're all in four corners of this tree. This tree is so big we can't even see each other through it. we're all like hollering through the tree, communicating, and then all of a sudden the tree just slid across the ground at I'd say 6 inches, and it was just like, once again, something that all four of us had to be like 1, 2, 3 push to even move it. And I know that I wasn't touching it, and I saw the person next to me wasn't touching it. So it's just like, nobody did it just to mess with each other. And that was the moment
we were
that
not physically strong enough to do that.
That tree was massive,
We were 16.
Yeah, exactly. We were just about 16, all just pretty small young girls. Yeah. So, and then after that, I remember Lauren and I, we refused to continue. We were just like, we're done. That's it. We just don't want to mess with them,
Well, and then I think the next night, all our friends were over, our two friends, and we were decorating the Christmas tree. And usually that's a huge thing in our house. We blast music. The music's so loud that no one can really talk. And then we just decorate our Christmas tree, hang our stockings, have a nice fire in the beautiful fireplace that we have in our living room. And then I just remember this moment. I was in the back of the tree, hanging stuff and probably tinsel, and then I look
lots of
at
tinsel.
the always Christmas stories status, and then I just remember looking at the door to our living room. For some reason we had a door that opened and closed, and I remember seeing my dad. He turned around and we both were staring at it, and I think you saw it and everyone saw it, but we couldn't talk about it because it was too loud in there. But the door was opening by itself, and it was kind of hovering open, and then all of a sudden Dad just goes over and karate kicks it closed. And we're all just like, huh. And then that was never spoken about after.
Which is pretty shocking, yeah, because it was a very impressive kick.
Yeah.
Really. And yeah, he's never done that before. He doesn't typically karate kick doors shut, so
Yeah.
it was just a weird unspoken moment.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, until I think we all talked about it after, maybe not with Dad, but yeah, we talked about it after, did you see the door kind of hovering open? And that's weird too. Usually the doors would swing open or swing closed, and this one was hovering kind of open, halfway open, to kind of it was so weird.
Yeah.
And I just remember, but that was kind of, at that point, it's normal.
Yeah.
Right? It was okay.
It was very normal, and to the point that my dad he's a pretty skeptic type of person with anything. So as we got older, we started kind of trying to communicate with him a bit more about the experiences in the house. And he kind of always brushed it off like, oh yeah, we have ghosts. He would always joke about it, you know, like he would always just, you know, we would make jokes like, oh, I think I lost my flannel. I think one of the ghosts took it, and he would come in, chime in and be like, oh yeah, I saw a flannel flying around earlier, you know, like just kind of poking fun at us. But then there was this one night where he finally admitted that he feels things and he sees things too. And he would always say that he saw like a little girl running around the house, like randomly. And that little girl was I've never seen her. It seems, and then we've had another person that my dad did not talk to, like another older guy who also experienced a little girl in our house and said that to us without talking, like never talked to my dad about it or anything. So it's just, it seems like the little girl was a presence that my dad saw living there.
It seems like men sees the little girl a little bit more. Because our friends that we were talking about with the Christmas tree, their dad, also huge skeptic, used to kind of make fun of me for talking about ghost stuff and just would make it seem like it was all in my head and everything. So I kind of got used to that. You know, he just wasn't a believer. But he finally, years later, admitted that he saw the little girl in our house. And he was like, it honestly is taking me a lot to admit this because of how much I made fun of you. Which, honestly,
so big of him.
You know, I'm happy he admitted it, though. It's better to hear it than, you know, him keep it to himself because he was a little prideful about it. Like, actually, that moment was really validating. And I actually appreciate that even if it took so long for him to admit it, that he did it because
it meant
I don't
a
know.
lot.
Yeah, it meant a lot. It meant that he knows that we weren't just lying or making up these stories
and
for
that's
fun.
how I feel about Dad too, finally admitting it, because he like once we hit high school, we started feeling comfortable to be like, hey Dad, like we are having experiences here, like all of these weird things are happening. And then like I think also we had our family dog with our mom, and his name was Brewski. Oh, rest in peace, Brewski. He's a great dog. He came to live with us at my dad's house.
He hated the house.
Yeah, he was hated the house. He was so scared, and like so we bring him inside, and I just remember he sat in our room in a corner. And he was shaking, and he just looked terrified. And we were like for a couple days, the first couple days he was there, and we just kept going up to him like, Brewski, are you okay? Like, and he was fine. He was like eating and drinking, and it like didn't seem, but he was too scared to move from that spot. Then about a week later, we would hear him barking, and then we'd go into the living room, and he was running circles, looking up at the ceiling, with his tail wagging like something was playing with him, and he's just running all around the living room crazy, but like looking up. And it was just such a weird, we're like, oh my gosh, is something like, is he
playing
seeing
with a ghost?
Yeah. And then he loved the house. So he had like playmates all the time. But I just remember that so distinctly, like just him first, like his first like response to being in the house and just being so afraid to like move around it and he was like older. He was a confident dog. It wasn't like he's a nervous dog. And then just to the point where he's just running around in circles, like barking at something in the air. It's just like, I think the ghosts were playing with him.
So as we mentioned, our house was built in 1749. That being said, there were a lot of different uses for our house in the past. Some known ones to us were it was a bed and breakfast. I don't know how long and the time period of when it was each of these things, but the bed and breakfast, so people stayed there, and we also had in our basement, and I think that this is why we think the basement's really creepy, is that it had a huge stone like stove. And we were always told that that's actually where the slaves and indentured servants would live. So there's been stories of people smelling like bone broth being made down there and hearing pots and pans down there, which I actually haven't had an experience like that, but I do believe it because it was always, that basement was really creepy, and you could tell that there was just some history that happened there. And I think while it was a bed and breakfast, we have a storefront in the front, and that was a bar. And then there was a stable, but the stable burned down. Luckily, it didn't burn any part of the house, weirdly. It was only the stable. I don't know if there were any casualties with horses or animals or anything, but it is interesting when you look at the house, you see that there's just kind of this grassy patch to the left of it, and it just makes sense that that's where there was a building there before. And then at one point it was a brothel, so that's interesting. There's kind of, my mom and a few other women that have lived there have actually said that the house hates women. I think Katie and I were an exception because we were so young when we moved in. But even we had friends that felt like they weren't welcome in our house. And
they would refuse to come in.
Yeah, they would refuse to come in. And not to get deep about this, but I think a lot of people that have moved into the house actually got divorced in that house too. And I think that it did have something to do with, I would assume the brothel ghost or something. There's just some energy that like kind of was a little woman hating, to be honest. But with that, Katie and I have kind of looked up history and kind of tried to figure out what happened here. My dad has a fact that when it was a bar and a bed and breakfast, there was like the first known hit to happen in front of our house in the county. So someone got killed there intentionally, like a pay for hire kill, right in front of the house. So obviously there's a little bit of that like tortured soul type of history.
Also just the fact that that property did have slaves, of course.
Yeah.
So you can only imagine the horrors that happened there. A big history of our town that we grew up in is that actually that we live across the street from a church. The church was part of the Underground Railroad, so houses across the street from us, in their basements, they had spots where they can hide people when they're on their journey getting out of slavery.
And even the church, the altar, under the altar, there's a hatch. And they used to
so
hide
you can put people in there.
under
So
the
you can
hatch.
only imagine the horrors
space.
and just the human like injustices that happened then during that time period too. So I think that leads to just the feeling of so much energy in our house or even on the land there that like who knows what could have actually happened to people there. So having all these experiences in that house that we grew up in and just having other experiences throughout life, it's definitely made me appreciate and interested in the paranormal. We have done such a deep dive once we started having all these things happen, just wanting to kind of maybe understand it and see what could cause it, because I believe in paranormal activity so much and how it can affect your life. But with that, I felt like all of our experiences were for the most part positive. It was scary to have something happen to you, but I never felt unsafe. So it was a very interesting perspective, especially hearing from other people having a little bit like scarier experiences. I feel grateful that we had just like ghosts that felt like they weren't trying to harm us or anything like that. It was just they were there and we like kind of learned to coexist with them and just respect the energy of worlds that we don't quite understand. So I feel like I just have a greater appreciation for things that I can't see and different energies that I might not even understand fully. And it's opened my mind to a lot of different things. And I've met a lot of cool people who have their own, like stories and stuff like that throughout life. So I feel like I've made some cool connections, like Chuck here.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you said. I feel like it gives you this respect because even watching different shows and stuff, you see a lot more like evil and darkness.
Yeah.
And it's, even though we were scared when we were younger, it was never anything threatening. It was just noises. And, it's funny because growing up in the house, I never physically saw a ghost. I heard them and kind of felt their energy more. So it is really interesting. One time I met a woman who, she was either, I don't know if she identified as a clairvoyant or a medium, but she definitely saw spirits, and her daughter did too. And her daughter was no more than like 5 years old. And I remember just almost kind of like fangirling her, which is ridiculous. But I'm like, that's so cool. Oh my gosh. And she kind of put me in my place and was like, don't ever wish to see what me and my daughter have seen. We see ugly things. And my daughter wakes up crying every night, or not every night, but a lot of nights, because something's at her window trying to get in and I can't see it. They see different spirits than each other. So I think that was a really eye-opening and humbling conversation that I had with somebody, because for me it was genuine interest and kind of almost obsession, but to hear it from somebody that kind of lives with it day to day and like almost is somebody that can kind of use their powers to probably help and see things and communicate, but it's also something that they can't shut off. So I think that was a really eye-opening conversation, even as short as it was. It made me have a lot more respect for it and understand that we have had it really easy with our paranormal activity. But
Just the light haunting.
Yeah, but it really does serve as a way to bond with people. I think that also as I've gotten older, it's that realization. I didn't realize that people didn't have experiences like this. So
Definitely.
even in high school and beyond, and I would talk about this at parties, like I was that girl. Totally. People were like, this girl's crazy. But then I started to kind of, almost only talk about it if it feels like an inviting environment, because it's not something that most people kind of have encountered. And I think so many people need that physical evidence and stuff to know that it's real. And I understand that aspect 100%, but I realize very quickly that my experiences are not very similar to a lot of people. So that's also was an eye-opening experience. It almost makes the people that have had those experiences just a little more special. Those encounters are really cool, and it means a lot when you find people that have had some sort of paranormal activity in their life, which is really cool.
And the very last question that I had for them was, if they were a ghost, how would they haunt and what would it be like?
If I was a ghost, I would have fun with it. We didn't really touch upon our brother's experience very much, but the ghosts and my brother, sorry, Billy, if you're listening, but they used to really mess with him to the point where, like, his stories were just, we all were like, really, Billy? Did that really happen? But they just kind of, I don't know, it was comical almost.
Yeah, it was funny.
Hearing his stories, and just because they would just mess with him in a whole different way than us and our parents. So I think that that's something that I would do too. Just do something really outlandish and funny, and maybe not do like the creepy footsteps and stuff, but I don't know. Just almost like Beetlejuice, when they're like doing stuff like that. That's funny, but not quite as scary. Because I definitely wouldn't get enjoyment out of seeing people terrified, and especially children.
Yeah, right.
Like I would not go up to a little kid and try to scare them or even befriend them. That's weird.
That's hilarious, because I was just thinking, if I was a ghost, I feel like I'm not really a prankster type of person.
Yeah.
So
You'd want to befriend?
I think not even be friends, because I'm an introvert, so no thank you. But I think I would be like helpful. maybe,
Yeah.
and then just like, it would just be more like, oh, you lost something, let me help you.
Yeah. You have to
like
be
lead you in the
careful,
way.
because if you
Yeah.
start becoming friends with the kid, then the parents think the kid's crazy.
I don't know. No. It would be from a distance.
Yeah.
It's not like I would like be trying to like talk to them or anything,
Yeah.
and they'd be like, "This is my friend Katie."
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't want that. But it's just like I think I would just more so be like, yeah, if they lost something, if they need help with something, and I can like kind of do it, I would.
Yeah.
Just because, like you, I don't want to scare people.
Yeah.
and then I just want to be a helpful presence, and maybe not even as known that
Yeah.
I'm there even.
Definitely.
Well, and there we have it. I sat captivated by the fire for the entire time they shared their stories. One, because I think they were so believable and went along with what I know to be very genuine experiences. And I always say that doesn't mean that they can't be surprising or even make us fearful. But I don't think they often come with malevolence. And oftentimes, I will say too that when it comes to hauntings, we still see people activity in these regular hauntings. And so I don't think it's demonic. I don't think it's evil, exactly like they said. Kind of TV over exaggerates that. The internet does too. So just remember, it's not always dark. It's not always evil. And I think we should just give a little more leeway to the possibility of more people possibilities, actually. So one other point that I want to bring up, of course, before we wrap up, is that of the Ouija board. And I'm kind of thinking that there might need to be a whole episode about the Ouija board itself, just because I also get so many questions about it on the tours. And so I do not think it's bad. I do not think it's evil. And it really just matters with your intention and how you use it. In the Halloween episode, you talked about me having boundaries and how important they are. And so it really goes over to the Ouija board as well. And so I think if you have respect, if you have boundaries, it can be an absolutely great, fun, and beneficial tool to use either by yourself or part of a group. I've never actually had success using it by myself. I've only had movement with other people, but most of the time, of course, I'm always very skeptical that someone in the group is moving it, and I've found oftentimes that tends to be true. So I have yet to have a Ouija board myself that really blows my eyes wide open and makes me feel like I've had a genuine paranormal experience through it. So I don't think it's evil. Just keep those boundaries and set them first before you use it. And that, my friends, is going to wrap up today's episode. A huge thank you to Katie and Lauren for joining me and sharing their personal experiences. It's not always easy to share to a large audience, and so I truly thank them for being vulnerable and sharing their truth. If you have any questions that you would like to ask about the paranormal or anything related to it, I am taking questions for next week's episode, in which I will be answering some of the most frequently asked questions that I get on tours. So if you have a burning and yearning question that you would possibly like to be featured, please email it directly to me at bellinghamghosttours@gmail.com. So thank you so much for being here, and always thank you for being open to the possibilities and perspectives that are shared in this podcast. So until next time, stay spooky, my friends.